Let me tell you about someone I know. Actually, when she first told me this story, we were just sitting over coffee one evening. Nothing dramatic, catching up, two friends, just talking. And she said something that stuck with me. She said, Neetu, I think my husband might be cheating on me. Now, the strange thing about that sentence is that people usually don't say it unless they've been thinking about it for a very long time. Her name isn't really Ananya, but let's just call her that. Ananya is a 29-year-old beautiful looking woman. About a year and a half ago, she met this guy on Shadi.com. You know those profiles, how they are. Professional photos, a very carefully written description, family oriented, ambitious, looking for a life partner. He seemed normal, actually more than normal. Polite, funny, good job. So they started talking. First, it was messages, then long phone calls. Then they met for coffee. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became late night drives where they talked about life, like people do when everything still feels exciting. And of course, all that turned into sleepovers. Many, many sleepovers with a lot of raw sex. And within 6 months, they got married, which honestly isn't unusual. When something feels right, speed feels rather romantic, not risky. The wedding was big, families were happy, photos looked perfect. For the first few months after marriage, everything seemed fine. They would go out often, watch movies, cook together sometimes. The intimacy was good, natural, easy. Then slowly, things started changing. Not dramatically, just quietly. The first change was work. He suddenly became very busy. Late meetings, client calls, deadlines, which made sense. People work hard. But then something else started happening. His phone. His phone suddenly became private. Before marriage, his phone would just lie around on the table. After marriage, it was always with him, always face down. And suddenly it had a lock. Now, privacy in relationships is normal, but secrecy has a different feeling. One evening, Ananya picked up his phone to check the time. He immediately turned around and said, Why are you using my phone? She laughed and said she just wanted to see the time. But he took the phone from her hand quickly and then he said something interesting. There should be privacy in marriage, which is true. But the word privacy sometimes appears exactly when someone doesn't want you to see something. Then came the phone calls. Late at night, he would suddenly step outside the apartment to talk. If she walked near the balcony, he would lower his voice or end the call. Just work, he would say. But work calls at 11:30 p.m. start to feel a little suspicious, especially when the conversation stops the moment you enter the room. Then came the work trips. Suddenly he had to travel. 2 days here, 3 days there, sometimes just overnight. Which is interesting because during the 6 months they were dating, he never mentioned this much travel. Now all of a sudden he had important meetings. And whenever Ananya asked details, the answers were always vague, just client stuff, which is a wonderfully flexible explanation. Now here's the part that starts to mess with your mind: suspicion. Once suspicion enters a relationship, it changes how you see everything. Ananya started noticing small things: how quickly he turned his phone screen away, how he smiled at messages and then locked the phone, how the phone went with him everywhere, even to the bathroom, which, by the way, is a place where people suddenly become very protective of their privacy. And her brain started doing what human brains do best, looking for patterns, looking for clues. She told me something once that I found very sad. She said, I feel like a detective in my own marriage, Neetu. She started watching everything, trying to see if something confirmed what she feared. And the strange thing is, she still has no proof, just instincts, just patterns, just that uncomfortable feeling that something isn't right. Sometimes she tries to bring it up, but he gets defensive immediately. You're overthinking, which is an interesting sentence because people who are hiding something love that line. You're imagining things. Now there's another layer, money. She doesn't really know how much he earns. She doesn't know where his money goes. Whenever she asks, the answers are vague. And that creates another uncomfortable question. What else don't I know? But here's the hardest part. She hasn't told anyone, not her parents, not her friends, because saying it out loud makes it real. And what if she's wrong? What if she confronts him and there's nothing? But then there's the other possibility. What if she confronts him and there is something? What if he really is sleeping with someone else? So instead, she lives in this strange space between doubt and suspicion, watching, thinking, wondering, and carrying this heavy question in her head every day. Am I imagining things or am I finally noticing them? Stories like hers happen far more often than people admit. Sometimes the suspicion turns out to be wrong. Sometimes it reveals something very painful. But either way, living with that uncertainty is exhausting. Now I'm curious about something. If you've ever been in a situation like this, what were the signs you noticed first? Was it the phone? The behavior change? The distance? And if you eventually found out the truth, what happened next? You can share your experiences in the comments if you feel comfortable. And before we end, I want to mention something. If you're dealing with a situation like this in your own relationship or marriage, and you're feeling confused or overwhelmed, you don't have to carry it alone. My name is Neetu Nazareth. I'm a counselor, and I work with people who are trying to make sense of complicated relationship situations like this. If you ever feel like you need a calm space to talk through what's happening in your life, you can reach out through the contact details in the description below. Sometimes, talking to someone outside the situation can help you see things more clearly. And sometimes, clarity is the first step toward deciding what comes next. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel in order for it to reach more people who would benefit from my guidance. Thank you.